All right, obviously we're talking to Frank Rosenthal in his South Florida home today, sort of reminiscing about a few things, and we're going to start, obviously, about a movie that's going to be coming out either late this summer or in the fall called Casino, and which is basically based on your life, somewhat loosely. They'll take some dramatic license, and that's going to, how do you feel, first of all, being portrayed in a movie?
Well, first, John, it isn't based on my life. It's based on a period of my life pertaining to the majority of what would be during my tenure in Las Vegas. Some of it goes back to Chicago. As to how I feel about it, it wasn't planned to be that way. It was planned to be a novel. I really have mixed emotions as to how I am being portrayed. Until I see the final product, I would probably reserve my opinion.
You were always considered something, although I know you had your own talk show in Las Vegas, but you've always been considered and consider yourself sort of a private person. It must have been, you must have given some thought to this before cooperating on this venture.
Absolutely correct. I did give a lot of thought to it. You might choose to be private, but sometimes, excuse me, sometimes certain things might surface that kind of compromise the privacy, and that did happen in this situation. And once the privacy factor was compromised, I decided that there'd be no point to remain that private, and did cooperate with Universal Studios, Nick Pileggi, the writer, the main writer, and Martin Scorsese and the creative people.
How can this change your life? Will it be, you think, you'll be something of a celebrity again?
I never perceived it to be that way. Certainly not as a celebrity. As far as changing my life, if it does, it was not intended to do so. That was not a consideration. It was simply a favor, originally from Oscar Goodman, a 25-year friend and attorney, who asked me to help Nick Pileggi, the writer, for technical assistance. The evolution became so massive and so interesting to Universal that they decided to make a movie out of it.
And Robert De Niro is going to be portraying a character based on your activities out there.
He's going to try.
Okay, all right. Now, let's fast forward to right now. You're managing a very upscale, obviously a very popular night spot, because we were there last night. How is this, do you enjoy this? Tell me how you feel about this type of thing.
My position is no matter what I'd be doing, the focus would be the same. You avoid what I would call the satisfaction syndrome. Whatever I approach it full speed, full time, eat, sleep, drink, whether it's Las Vegas or an upscale restaurant and bar. So I devote all my energy, all my time, all my focus, and that's the only way I know how to do things.
All right, let's set the clock back for a youngster. You grew up in Chicago, West Rogers Park, and then you moved out to Las Vegas sometime in the 60s. You'd already had some experience handicapping. You went out there and became a gambler. And were you a good one? And tell me this, you were handicapping, you were betting, you were a booker.
When I moved to Las Vegas, I moved to Las Vegas because it was legal. It was more opportunity as far as being right there on the scene. Sports wagering, if you didn't live in Las Vegas, was from the element of the law enforcement, you were taking a risk. It was more timely to be in Las Vegas, to be able to walk into a legitimate sports book. I think you might make an analogy being on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange as opposed to being in your home. And I decided that if I wanted to beat this game, I had to be in the stock exchange. And that was the way I went, and that's what I did.
You later went into the casino business. You went in as a neophyte, went to the Stardust in the late 1960s, and you rose from foreman to eventually director of operations. Some people think that was a meteoric rise, and you did so because you were connected.
I think when you say I went in as a neophyte, I think you're complimenting me. I think I was less than that. On the other hand, when I moved to Las Vegas, my background, I had at least 15, possibly 20 years of gaming experience. That's not to say that I understood the casino side of it, both either inside or out. But my rise from floorman, you're correct, to director of Nevada operations for the second largest corporation within the state, the first being the Howard Hughes property, had nothing to do with any outside elements. I paid my dues. I went up through every single level of command.
Yet you were hounded, you contend, by the authorities eventually. You were director of the operations of these 4 big casinos, these 4 big hotels, and then, of course, you got into trouble with the Gaming Commission. Was that political, or what was it that sabotaged you, if you can make it in a nutshell on that?
I didn't get into trouble, John. Excuse me. I was in trouble when I landed from Chicago into Las Vegas. I was arrested 3 times, I think, in 72 hours, simply because of my reputation as a professional gambler, the city that I came from, and people that I had an association with, friends. So I don't think I ever had a chance, as far as the perception of the state, the authorities, the gamers, the people that call the shots. I tried my best to avoid any problems, led a life as clean as anybody could possibly lead. Got married, raised 2 children, and did the best I could. It wasn't good enough for them.
Let's talk briefly a little about the personal life, because that's going to be coming out in the movie, of course. You married Geri, a showgirl, and as you indicate, you raised 2 bright young people, children that have done very well. And according to reports, that Geri started having an affair with a friend of yours, Tony Spilotro. Anything you can relate to us about that?
I can comment this way rather than no commenting. Geri's deceased. Tony's deceased. Neither one of them can speak for themselves. My 2 children are still living. I think for me to speak in a negative manner about their mother would be in poor taste. There's been several stories written about it. And I just think, again, for me to affirm the allegations, the suspicions, just wouldn't be in good taste, considering the fact, again, that she was or is the mother of my children.
There was something, of course, you couldn't remember. It was as traumatic a thing that happened to you in your whole career. You came out of a restaurant, Tony Roma's, I believe, got into your Cadillac and turned on the ignition, and there was a bomb in there. Tell me a little about that incident.
Well, I'm not sure if I ever turned the ignition on. The second part of your question is accurate. There was a bomb in the car, obviously. I don't recall the initial explosion. I never heard anything. What I did see was fire shooting up from the floor onto the windshield. At the time, I was probably semi-conscious. My recollection was that my car was on fire, and flames were shooting up from the left and the right and in front of me. And I attempted to open the door with my left hand. And as I did, the fires were too intense, the heat was so intense that I had to pull my left hand back. I then made one gesture with my right arm towards the lever of the door side, the driver's side, and fortunately pushed it through my shoulder against the door, and for some reason it popped open, and I was able to tumble out of the car onto the street afire.
How badly burned were you?
I don't know what the degree of the burns were. I had broken ribs. I was burned, both arms, both legs, my forehead, but the recovery was fairly quick.
Any idea who, that case was never cleared, or as the authorities say, solved, as to who was responsible for planting that bomb there or who actually wanted it done? Do you have any ideas on that?
I've been asked that question from probably the day of the bombing. Well, not probably, in fact I was. In fact, that evening in the emergency room, I was invaded by the FBI, Clark County Intelligence, and many agencies thereafter, and asked the same question that you've asked me. And I've had many years to try to analyze. As you said, the bombing remains unsolved. And I really couldn't say with any accuracy who placed the bomb there, who is the one that persuaded someone to place the bomb. It would be pure speculation, and I wish I knew.
Were you thinking of revenge at one time?
I never thought of revenge because that really wouldn't be the answer. First of all, revenge on who? I wouldn't know where to go, for revenge.
The authorities wanted you to go in what was sometimes been described as the witness protection program, or wanted you to become an informant after that?
I was invited into that program less than 24 hours after the bombing. Carte blanche, the Riviera, you name it. Your own home, estate, horses, wineries. And I chose to remain as is, status quo, and took my chances.
All right, that brings us almost up to here, Frank, with the other point. As you say, you did lose, and you feel, and that because as you I think indicated earlier in our interview, that because of some of the people, the associations, the prejudice against us, you did lose your license out there. You could have stayed out there if it would have.
I lost my license. I lost more than that. I lost my work card.
Yeah.
In fact, which the result being you cannot work within the state in any capacity. But that was as a result of the word organized crime has been used loosely. And I keep hearing that word. I've heard it from day one, from the time I got off the plane in Las Vegas until this day. And I will say this to you. Organized crime did exist during my tenure in Las Vegas. And I knew every single member of the organized crime family. And there were approximately 20. And they were comprised of the Gaming Control Board, the Gaming Commission, all appointed officials, maybe one or two county commissioners, maybe two local judges, and possibly one Supreme Court justice. Those were the real organized crime factor. They controlled everything that went on within that state. And that's what I consider to be the real organized crime element. If you're not on their team, they can do anything they want to you, me, or anyone else.
And you weren't a team member?
Not with them, no.
So the establishment is the one that you're saying is the fact that is what we would call the Vegas or Nevada establishment of judges, gaming board, and commission members are the ones that put you down there.
Well, primarily the Gaming Control Board, the Gaming Commission, county commissioners, as I said. They're one group together. And everything's done in the back room. And they've got you wired one way or the other. It's either a go or a no-go. And they determine your future.
And there was no future for Frank Rosenthal as far as they're concerned.
Well, number one, correct. Number one, the word Chicago was a no-no as far as they were concerned. What they use an expression called frontier justice. And as I said, I was arrested 3 times within 3 days. My first arrest, I was taken into the chief of detectives in cuffs. Met the chief of detectives, told me that people from Chicago were unwelcome in Las Vegas. He then challenged to see how long I could hold my breath while he held my throat for approximately 45 seconds until I came close to collapsing. He then advised me that I should be on the next airplane back to Chicago by the following morning. If not, he would have me back in the same room under worse circumstances. I wasn't smart enough to leave. He kept his word. He did arrest me again. And they finally persuaded me to leave temporarily. And through a good friend of mine in Las Vegas named Dean Chandel and others, I was able to get the then sheriff to restrain himself and allow me to return back and have freedom of movement, however, with the curfew.
We're talking to Frank Rosenthal. He had mentioned a very unpleasant arrival when he came out to Las Vegas. Things finally did eventually work out. And let's put it this way, Frank, if you'd ever went back with your, let's assume you apparently have no desire to do that now. If you ever went back to Las Vegas to manage a casino, could Frank Rosenthal make a profit for the owners? Could Frank Rosenthal cut the mustard out there?
Well, I'll answer you in two parts. One, I don't think it's realistic that I would, but to answer your question, which I think is very simple, I don't think I've lost any of, I think I've retained whatever I knew at the time. And one thing, regardless of my reputation, whether it be my advocates or opponents, no one ever challenged my ability as an administrator or a casino operator. And yes, I think I would be capable and competent to match the skills of anybody that's ever worked in the industry.
Any major regrets about some of the decisions you made?
Absolutely. I think life, I guess you might compare it to a pencil. We all have erasers. And certainly there are many times that I wish I'd have done things a little bit differently. As far as Las Vegas is concerned, no, I really didn't have alternatives. When someone slaps you in the face and knocks you down, you have two choices: get up and run or get up and fight. And I chose to get up and fight rather than run.
Just one thing I should ask, the allegations about, I forget, the skimming situation again. We talked about that before. How did you know anything about any skimming that was going on?
There was never any skimming that took place during my tenure. There was a period that I left the building for approximately 13 months that the state was able to determine that there was what they considered to be skimming within the property. Theft there was. Theft there is. There's theft today in every casino in Nevada, in every major corporation in this world. It's a question of the level of theft and where's it coming from, the inside, the outside, or both. But there was no skimming that ever took place while I was in charge or had responsibility for any of those 4 properties.
Thanks so much, Frank.